Okay, we're going to start something new. We're going to kind of work with a little introduction first, this first lesson and all. And I'm just kind of a hodgepodge of things that might be important to keep in mind as we study the book of Daniel. And if my flipper will work, we'll go to the next screen. All right, first things first. Daniel, the chapters in Daniel are not in chronological order. How many of you knew that? Okay, some did. We got 12 chapters in the book of Daniel. I reread chapter 13 and 14 that's found in some of the other translations of the Bible. Chapter 13 had to do with it's not those chapters are not accepted into the book of Daniel because the chapter 13 had to do with this beautiful girl that was married to this rich guy that had this big garden, and this garden was used by the elders, those that were in authority, and judges, and when the garden wasn't in use, she would walk in the garden, but there was a couple of guys that got infatuated with her, and they made some devious plans, and when she refused their advances, then they brought charges against her, and anyway, she ended up coming out on top because that's what that chapter is about. So that just wasn't accepted in the book of Daniel. Chapter 14 has to do with Daniel and Astyages, the ruler. He worshipped his God. Daniel worshipped his God. And he asked Daniel, why do you not worship my God? Daniel tells him, your God's not really a God. My God is the only true God. And so they put to a series of tests, and Daniel's God comes out. So that, so they didn't accept that part of the, they think that was all added later. But the book of Daniel is a fascinating book, but it's got 12 chapters in it. The authorized version has these 12 chapters. The first 4 chapters have to do with Nebuchadnezzar's reign. The chapter 5 is where Belshazzar dies. Chapter 6 is where Cyrus takes Babylon, sets up Darius, or Darius, whatever you want to say, as in Babylon. And then in chapter 7 and 8, we have Belshazzar's reign. Notice Belshazzar died before he ever ruled. You see that? That's what. Then we have Darius' first year, which took place really back in chapter 6. And then 10, 11, and 12 have to do with Cyrus and the end of the captivity and him issuing a decree for allowing Zerubbabel and Joshua to go back to rebuild the temple. So so if we correct this, and put it in chronological order, we would have to take chapter 5 and put it after chapter 8. Chapter 6 after chapter 5. Then we'd have to put chapter 7 after chapter 4 and chapter 8 after 7 there. So you'd have to switch those around to get it in chronological order. That would put Belshazzar's reign before Belshazzar died, and so forth. And so that's just something to keep in mind when you're reading it. I think I read the book of Daniel year after year after year, never noticed this. I mean, for years I never knew it was out of sequence. Also, part of Daniel is written in Aramaic instead of Hebrew. In fact, if if I remember, this is off the top of my head, I think that from somewhere around chapter 2, maybe 3, somewhere around there, it switches to Aramaic, and it's Aramaic to chapter 7 or 8 or somewhere in there. We'll get to that later on, but I just can't remember now. But part of it is written in Aramaic, where part of it is in Hebrew. This is an artist's concept of, I thought it'd be kind of interesting to see a little bit about where all of this, the majority of this, even though in the last years of Daniel's life, he was in Susa, which is in Elam, which is now part of Iran. In fact, his tomb is in Susa. Daniel's tomb is there. But I thought it'd be interesting to look a little bit at Babylon. This is the artist's concept of what Babylon looked like from all of the information that can be gathered. If we look at the ancient city of Babylon and we use the information that we have, we know that Babylon grew under the reign of Nebuchadnezzar. We knew that what it was before was nothing like it was after he began to rule. And of course he ruled, we'll see this number, we'll see these years, as we go through we'll see these years time and time again. But he took control of the Babylonian Empire in 605 BC, and after his dad passed away. In fact, he was in the field at the time. Herodotus, who was a Greek historian that lived about somewhere between 500 and 400 BC, is one that gives a lot of information about Babylon in his writings. And he tells us that Babylon was a square 15 miles on each side. That's quite a large city. 15 miles. 60 miles to go around it. That's quite a large place. In fact, did you know that Babylon is mentioned, with the exception of Jerusalem, is mentioned more than any other city in your Bible? You know. And you have Babylon from early on in the scripture. You have Babylon to the book of Revelation. You know, the only other city that's mentioned more is Jerusalem. But Herodotus tells us that it was surrounded by a brick wall, 87 feet thick. And he says it was 350 feet high. They question that. They think that probably it was no more than 100, not 350, but Herodotus tells us it was 350 feet high. I visited a place when it was on the Euphrates River once. It was a ruins. It was called Dura Europos. And it was built by one of Alexander the Great's generals that took that part of the country after Alexander the Great died. And I was kind of amazed at how thick the wall was on Dura Europos. How thick it was. It was probably from this wall to that wall. Inside, as you went through what was left of the gates, it actually had double gates. You know, a gate there on the front part, a gate on the back part. And as you went into that part, there were rooms on each side. I suppose rooms were, and large rooms on each side in that wall, kind of like, I guess you'd stick something into, you know, into an area this wide. And I guess that's where the elders would gather and do their business or whatever. But it just amazed me that that they built, and it was all out of brick, you know. It was that thick, and it amazed me too about the size of Europa's. It was one large place. The houses in them, though, the places where people lived, wasn't very big. In fact, the matter is, you had to stoop down to go into the door, and the rooms wouldn't be very, very big at all, you know. But overall, the city was quite large. But anyway, getting back to this, it said that this was 87 feet thick. And on the wall, it had, according to him, it had 250 towers. These are watchtowers. These are where watchtowers. And it was wide, the walls was wide enough that you could drive 6 chariots side by side around the top of this wall.
Wow.
Outside the wall, there was a moat that went around, completely around the city. It was filled with the water there from the Euphrates River. And inside of that was another wall. So the city had essentially a double-walled city, according to Burroughs. There were 25 avenues in the city. Some were going north and south, 25 going east and west, and it made 676 square or blocks inside the city, and each of these were 3/5 of a mile on each side. So he goes into quite a detail trying to describe this Babylon. Now this is where Daniel ends up at first. This is where he's taken to. This is where he goes to college. This is where he is living in. That was the city was divided into 2 parts. If you noticed the picture a while ago, it showed the river coming right down through the city, and it's divided into 2 parts by the river, which run diagonally through the river. And they had these brass gates on each side, steps that went down to the water. It was quite a magnificent place, mainly built under the reign of Nebuchadnezzar. And he wasn't the first to rule in Babylon. In fact, the actual setup or the actual start of the Babylonian Empire was under one Hammurabi. In fact, he's the one. He come up with a set of rules or laws before anybody else. Before Moses, he come up with. I've got got some of the excerpts out of the laws of Hammurabi. He got, and this is not accurate, but I mean, just to give you an idea of some of his rules, it's kind of like, if a guy steals another guy's donkey, the law was you tied his hands and throw him and feet, throw him in the river. I mean, he would just have simple rules like that, but if you messed up, you messed up. So but he did. He come up with a whole set of laws, and I got them sometimes. It's interesting to read them because some of the things you got to scratch your head about. But he was one of the first to ever come up with a set of laws, and he's the one that organized all of the tribes that were in the area, all the different bunches of people, and began to build the empire. And at that time, Babylon was just a little village, but he made that his capital, and it began to build. But it didn't really get built to the extent that's being described by Herodotus here until Nebuchadnezzar took the throne, and his father and him. At the end of the main avenues on each side of the city, there were gates that they use the term leaves, but it means the part that opens and closes it. They were brass, and you could see them from miles off because they shone in the sun, you know. Had some bridges in the city. On each side of the bridge, there was palaces. And these palaces were connected to subterranean tunnels that went underneath the river. And underneath the river, and on each side, they had these big banquet rooms, you know. Near one of these palaces stood the Tower of Babel, which evidently stands for Babel. Bel was one of the gods that was worshipped in Babylon, and it consisted of 8 towers, each 75 feet high, rising one upon the other, with an outside winding stairway to its summit, which towers with a chapel on the top, made about 660 feet. Some of these dimensions that Herodotus gives, you kind of got to take with a grain of salt, you know. But it does give you an idea about Babylon, and this was one of the things that was there. The chapel on top, they say at the time that he described it, would have been its furnishings and the way it was. Actually, around the top of they would put the signs of the zodiac. You know. Fact of the matter is, and we'll touch on it later on when we get into the book, but the Chaldees, or the word that we get Chaldean from, has a couple of meanings. In the Bible, it refers to the territory, but it also refers to the fact that they were stargazers. They studied the stars, and they're the ones that they come up with the relationship of man to the stars and the zodiac and all this stuff. You know, stay away from it if you. That's good advice too. No, stay away from it. You know.
Yeah.
And then there was something that was known as the Hanging Gardens. Described as one of the ancient wonders of the world. These gardens were 400 feet square and were raised in terraces. What they did was they built this terrace. Then on top of it, they moved in, they built another terrace. Then moved in, they built another terrace, and also till they reached the top. And the reason they did this was because Nebuchadnezzar had married a Median ruler's daughter. And Media was in the mountain country. It was where trees and you know, if you love the mountains, you can understand her disappointment when they brought her into the plains of the Euphrates, and there's no mountains. You know, it's just flat. And she got so homesick that he just built her a mountain. And on each one of these terraces, they put trees, planted big trees, they planted bushes, just all kinds of stuff. And they even developed a watering system, a mechanical watering system that would reach down, get the water, carry it up to every terrace and water all of this stuff, you know, just to keep the princess, the queen, happy. See what you do when you got to keep the queen happy. Said the topmost terrace was reached by a staircase, and it was 19 feet wide. Top of each terrace was covered with large stones, on which they laid a bed of rushes, then a thick layer of asphalt, next 2 courses of brick, cemented together, and finally plates of lead to prevent leakage. It was then covered with earth and planted with shrubbery and large trees. The whole had the appearance from a distance of a forest-covered mountain, which was a very remarkable sight to see in the plains of the Euphrates. Yeah. I always heard about the Euphrates, the Tigris Euphrates, you know. And so when I went over there, I expected to see something like, I've seen the Amazon and the Mississippi. I expected to see something that was bigger than the Amazon. I don't know, I just had my mind to seeing a river that was huge, you know. But the river I saw is not really all that big. I mean, you know, as far as wide. But the Euphrates is historically really a great subject. Babylon was probably the most magnificent city of the world, and at this time, we talk. Nebuchadnezzar had taken Jerusalem in 605 BC, but Jerusalem really was just a little place when Babylon was this big in comparison. This is a picture of where Babylon used to be, and near some of the buildings that Saddam Hussein, when he started, you know, he was started to rebuilding Babylon. In fact, the matter is, some of the bricks in Babylon had Nebuchadnezzar's name on them. When some of the buildings, some of the works there, but and when Saddam Hussein started building it, he had his name put on the bricks that was being built. He saw himself as a revived Nebuchadnezzar. He was going to rule, you know. Didn't turn out well. All right, the book of Daniel. In the book of Daniel, we're going to see some weird creatures. A lion with wings, bear with 3 ribs in its mouth, leopard with 4 heads, 4 wings, dragon with 10 horns, you know, and all have meaning. Let me say this, first of all. The first half of the book of Daniel has a lot of historical value. I mean, that's mainly what it is. It's history, you know. But the last part of it has a lot of prophetic value, because that's what it mostly is. Let me show you something else, just to kind of, I forgot about the ram and the goat with the 1 horn. You know, we'll see them in here too. All have significant meaning in world history, and also prophetically. A lot of people forget, because you can take some of these prophecies and you can apply them to history and see where, yeah, that's where it took place. But then you'll find also, see, for example, in chapter 7, it talks about the abomination of desolation. And so Antiochus Epiphanes, that's what he did. He went and offered a pig on the altar on the Temple Mount. He forbid the circumcision of children. He forbid the reading of the Torah. But the thing is that, and he set up a statue of Jupiter in the temple, on the Temple Mount, you know, which was an abomination, you know. And they say, well, look, that's where it was fulfilled. But when Jesus comes along, Jesus says that's not all the story. Because when he comes along, he warns us in Matthew 24, he says, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel. So Jesus says, that happened back there is not all of the story. It's going to happen again. You know. So that's what we see. And all of these have to do with end time history. Let me show you an overall picture. No, it's not a picture. A graph. No, it's not a graph. Diagram or whatever. Let me show you something, okay? I'll show you something. All right. First of all, we just look at the history of Israel. Remember, this is a book about a nation. You know, a lot of times we lose sight of it. Everybody tries to make other things out of some of these symbols and everything, but it's God who chose a nation. He said, "You didn't choose me; I chose you." You know, and in the book of Daniel, it starts with the book with Babylon. I'm trying to think of and then Persia, Greece, Rome, and then we got the church age, you know, which we don't see in the Old Testament. You just don't see it. It's hidden in there. I have run across some scriptures in there that makes me think it's talking about the church. But really, in essence, it's hidden in there. So you got the church age, and then, according to Daniel, you have a revived Rome. But remember this, in the study of it, remember that Rome there was a western part of Rome, and there was an eastern part of Rome. When the western part of Rome fell, the eastern part lasted for over 1,000 years. You know, and it talks. We're talking about. We see in our study, we'll see that it does tell us that last kingdom, that Rome kingdom, will come back, will revive. And I'm going to kind of throw some stuff into the mix for your thinking when we get to that point. It's because, see, what we see happening over there in Israel right now has to do with the eastern part of the old Roman kingdom. You know, and we'll deal with that. The Bible talks about the Assyrian. We're going to deal with that. But see, if you look up here, Assyria is not in this. You know, the Assyrian kingdom had been defeated earlier by Nebuchadnezzar's father. So they broke away and built this kingdom again. But anyway, that's just kind of if we lay the history of Judah on top of it. Now remember that it was Assyria that took the 10 tribes to the north, took them into bondage, scattered them all over the world. And so much that sometimes now we refer to them as the lost tribes of Israel, you know. But God knows where they're at, you know. And they're not really lost in that sense, you know. In fact, I was reading one Jewish scholar was writing from Israel about finding some of the lost tribe of Dan up in India somewhere, up in northern part of India, in the Himalayas, you know, up there. That over these years they've been studying the Torah. They've been, you know, keeping and he was claiming that they by DNA they checked they're part of the tribe of Dan, is what he was saying. So I mean, you know, they were scattered all over by Assyria and ceased to exist. as far as a nation there. And when this starts, when Daniel starts, it's Judah, that the tribe of Judah, that the history of it. So we find Judah being captured or taken by Babylon, go into exile. We have a recovery period that under the Persian government. We have oppression under the Grecian government. Then we have occupation under Rome. Then we find the temple is destroyed in AD 70. They're scattered again. And then we have a restoration taking place. And we're somewhere right in here. We've got the church and restoration taking place right now. Folks, I don't know whether you realize it, we're living in one of the most exciting prophetic times in history.
Amen.
You know, we've seen Israel coming to being in 1948. You know, we've seen all of this stuff begin to take place in our lifetime.
That's it.
You know, in our lifetime. And I mean, there's signs everywhere to saying, you know, the Lord's at work. Prophecy is taking place. Jesus is coming soon. I mean, it's never been like this any other time in history. I mean, I can read, you know, for years and years and years, we didn't have a whole lot happening. And all of a sudden it begins to happen in our lifetime, and I'm seeing it. You know. But anyway, then we're seeing restoration take place. And we understand by prophecy that after that there's going to be a time of Jacob's trouble. We call it tribulation period. 7 years set aside for that period. And of course at the end we're going to have the millennium, the reign of Christ on this earth. He's going to show this world what it means to. We talk about peace. We talk about peace agreement with Iran. They talk about all of this stuff. You know, I mean, you're peace, 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 peace. They don't know what peace is. We don't know what peace is until the peacemaker, until he sits on the throne on this earth, and everything. He's going to straighten everything out. He's going to straighten everything out. You know, take the animosity out of the animals even. You know, you're going to do what he says, whether you like it or not. It's not going to be the Supreme Court.
Amen.
It's not going to be a judicial system in our. It's not going to be a president, or it's not going to be a Congress that's going to decide whether it's what you're going to do what he wants to do. He said to rule with a rod of iron. A rod of iron. The shepherd used to. That's what he'd do. He'd cut him a little sapling, but he cut it. He cut it so it'd be, you know, 4 or 5 foot long. But he'd dig around it and he'd cut down around the root system so that the rod would have a ball on the end of it. And he'd trim it up so it had a ball. See? So if some kind of a wolf or whatever comes up, that's what he's whacking with. Whacking with that rod, with that ball on it. You know, I don't know exactly how it's going to work. It's going to be the word out of his mouth that's going to knock everybody down and get everybody in line. But he's going to rule.
Yes.
You know,
Okay.
he ought to be ruling in our lives now. That's the. But anyway, let me get back to whatever I'm showing you here. What we're going to be looking at is the battle of Carchemish. This is when Nebuchadnezzar defeated Pharaoh Necho. We were studying this in the book of Jeremiah, and I got to say, in the study of the book of Daniel, you're going to find a lot of things that we looked at in Jeremiah, you know, should be showing up in here, because what we did in Jeremiah is we took a span of years that take in part of the book of Daniel. You know, so we'll be touching on that. But in 605 BC, at the Battle of Carchemish is also the time when Nebuchadnezzar's dad died. Nebuchadnezzar was in the field with the army. He met Pharaoh Necho at Carchemish, defeated him, and then he gets word that his dad has died. And as he returns to go back to Babylon to take the throne, he says, I'll just take Judah on the way back. And that's what he does in 605 BC. Now, according to those of us that look at the overall historical picture, this is when we think that what this term, the time of the Gentiles, started. It will end when at the second coming of Christ, at the end of the tribulation period, at the end of, and that will end the time of the Gentiles, the times of the Gentiles, and that's referred to in Daniel chapter 2, and so we'll look at things like that as we go through this book. If you want to know exactly where the time of the Gentiles is spelled out, you can find it in Luke chapter 22, where he refers to the times of the Gentiles. 586 BC was the third siege by Nebuchadnezzar, and this is when the temple was destroyed. I mean, it was like, I've had enough of these people. And he destroyed the whole of Jerusalem. Burnt the houses, we saw that in Jeremiah. Destroyed the temple, carried everything off. Now if you kind of try and remember that there were 3 different sieges. Now we're not dealing with, on our chart, we're not dealing with the middle one, but just the first and last one. But just kind of remember there were 3 different times that Nebuchadnezzar had to go back to Jerusalem and try and straighten the people out, But anyway, the third one was when the temple was destroyed. Then we find that in 538 BC, Cyrus defeats the Babylonian Empire. You know how he did it? You got a double wall around this city, 87 feet high. I mean wide, 100 foot high, double wall, all the way around. It's got towers all around. You know how he took Babylon? There was a river that ran right through it, remember? It ran diagonally through the city. What he did was diverted the water of the river. His soldiers walked in under the wall, took the city, while Belshazzar was having a drunken party. It was 3 days before the whole of the city had found out that Cyrus had taken over.
That's quite a party.
And he takes the city. God, this is God. Nearly 200 years before, God had called Cyrus's name before this ever happened in prophecy. There are 2 people in prophecy that God tells us that their names. I mean, their names before they ever come on the scene. Cyrus is one. Does anybody remember who the other one is? Good King Josiah. 150 years before Josiah ever took the throne, God called his name in prophecy. God knows what's going on, folks. I know sometimes we wonder what's happening, but God knows what's going on. And time's run out. I got to quit. We hadn't even got to the first person, but Daniel yet. But just kind of a hodgepodge of whatever you want to call it, information or. But I kind of wanted to show you the overall plan so that we can see everything that Daniel fits in there. So we'll come back to the chart next week. Yes, sir.
I heard a comment by man this last week that if there was only 2 people left on the face of the earth, they'd still find something to fight about.
That's probably true.
Oh, public. God bless you, I quit.